Good afternoon and welcome, and thank you for standing by. At this time, all participants are in listen-only mode. Today's webinar is being recorded. If you have any objections, you may disconnect at this time. Now I'd like to turn the call over to your host, Mr. Nidal Jabran.
Thank you, Sam. Before we begin, a few housekeeping items. We will save all of our questions to the end of the presentation. Please add your questions into the Q&A box in the lower right-hand corner, and we will read them aloud after the presentation. The chat has been disabled to our attendees at this time. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us for the September Local Employment Dynamics, or LED, webinar. On behalf of the U.S. Census Bureau and the LED Partnership, in collaboration with Jamie Vaughn, Jeff DeBellis, and Maggie Smith, as they present using LED tools for special research projects to inform customers. This presentation will share how the North Carolina Labor and Economic Analysis Division, or LEAD, leverages LED research tools to answer questions about what is going on in their economy, particularly using tools like On the Map, Job-to-Job Explorer, Quarterly Workforce Indicators Explorer, and more to answer questions and inform their customers about economic trends through articles, presentations, and social media posts to help better explain North Carolina's economy. Jamie Vaughn is a senior analyst for market intelligence with the North Carolina Department of Commerce's LEAD. In his role, he focuses on economic and occupational development of the nccareers.org career information system. Prior to coming to LEAD, he worked in multiple positions with the Department of Commerce's Business and Industry Division, the Chatham County Economic Development Corporation, and the Durham Workforce Development Board. He holds a BA in economics from the University of North Carolina at Asheville and an MBA from the Florida State University. Jeff DeBellis is the Director of Economic and Policy Analysis in the North Carolina Department of Commerce's LEAD. In this role, he leads a team of analysts and economists in conducting research and developing insights and data tools on North Carolina's economy and labor market. He advises local and state leaders on workforce and economic development trends and in the development of the state's strategic economic development plan. His responsibilities also include researching job and industry trends, conducting economic impact analyses, managing and growing the state's career information system, nccareers.org, and producing various publications, dashboards, and resources to help North Carolinians make informed economic decisions. Before joining the Department of Commerce in 2012, Jeff worked in research roles for nearly 15 years with NC's Small Business and Technology Development Center and RTI International. Maggie Smith is a research analyst in the North Carolina Department of Commerce's LEAD. She has over 15 years of experience in research and data analysis. Prior to LEAD, she was a research analyst for the Economic Development Coalition of Asheville-Buncombe County and a research assistant professor at UNC Chapel Hill. She earned a BA in psychology from Kent State University, as well as an MS in psychology and PhD in neuroscience from Binghamton University. And with all that, I'll turn it over to Jeff.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. I am Jeff DeBellis, and I will be kicking things off today on this webinar entitled Using LED Tools for Special Research Projects to Inform Customers. As Nidal mentioned, we are part of the Labor and Economic Analysis Division within the North Carolina Department of Commerce. You can think of the work that we do as part labor market information shop. We are the federal state partner with the Bureau of Labor Statistics, so we collect a lot of data. We publish the unemployment rate, the jobs numbers, the wage and industry data that's reported monthly. We are also the purveyor of the state's longitudinal data system. If you are familiar with longitudinal data systems, you understand what we do. If you're not, essentially we take big data, administrative data from our workforce and education programs and analyze outcomes in the labor market as far as employment and wages. We do a lot of other economic analysis using big administrative data to help inform policymakers and program managers. We are also partly the state's economic development research arm. So we help in the pursuit of our state's recruitment and expansion of companies, doing industry analysis and company briefs, doing industry reports for the governor's office and legislature. And lastly, we help to assess the state's economy and to give presentations to help people to make better, more informed decisions. In addition to doing presentations, we develop a lot of publications, we do research, we have online data tools and resources and data systems that we use to serve basically everyone in the state who could utilize labor market and economic data, from those in middle school looking at educational and career opportunities up to the governor's office. So today we're going to talk about three things. Essentially, how we utilize our LED's products in identifying deficiencies and opportunities in the labor market. And specifically, we're going to talk about using quarterly workforce indicators. Then we'll turn it over and look at how we've utilized the loads commuting data to identify new labor market regions and to apply those in our economic development, workforce development, and policy in the state. And then lastly, we'll look at job-to-job flows and on the map and how we've utilized those to respond to economic development and workforce development projects. So to kick things off, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Maggie Smith, who will highlight some of the uses of QWI. Maggie?
Hello, everyone. Yes, I'm Maggie Smith. It's a pleasure to be here. Today, I'm going to talk to you about how we use quarterly workforce indicators, or QWI data, to highlight labor market deficiencies and opportunities. So before I get into the details of that particular research, I do want to take a moment to step back for those of you who may not be as familiar with QWI data and note some of the benefits of using this data source. So first off, QWI data is available for multiple geographies. So you can do statewide analysis, which is what I'll primarily be talking about for this presentation. But you can also look at metro or micro level data, Workforce Development Board, as well as by county. Another benefit of using QWI is at the industry level, you have 2, 3, and 4-digit NAICS codes available so that you can take a deeper dive for industry research, if that's what you're interested in. And a unique feature is the firm characteristics that are available by age and size on QWI. So there's a lot of research questions that you can help to answer using QWI data. Today, I'm going to focus on workforce demographics. QWI is great in that it pairs our demographic and labor market data. And a focus of our current administration is to help make advancements on issues of equity. And so we use QWI data to identify disparities and opportunity gaps in the labor market regarding gender, age, and race and ethnicity. And I'll give you an example of a research project for each of those topics in just a moment. To give you a little bit more context, we at LEAD respond to research requests, and we also conduct a proactive research to help inform our partners and customers. And we disseminate this information in a few different ways, one of which is by writing blog articles for what we call our lead feed. Here I have a list for you of all of our recent lead articles within the past year and a half or so using LED data. Most of this is using QWI data, but there are some J2J articles in there, and Jamie's going to go over that a little bit later in the presentation. So I'm going to start by talking about the first two, our most recent blog articles. So the first one is looking at the gender wage gap in North Carolina and whether that has improved since 2019. So here I'm showing you percentage wage growth from 2019 to 2022 for women in the blue bars and men in the gray bars. And as you can see, women had higher percentage wage growth in the majority of industries in North Carolina from 2019 to 2022. So this was quite promising when we saw this data. The next question we asked is whether the women in these industries gained more dollars than men in that same time period. So when we looked at dollar gains between 2019 to 2022, we had the opposite conclusion. So men actually had greater dollar gains than women in most industries. However, women did add more money to their paycheck than men in 6 industries noted in the blue bars, with the information industry at the top there. So men had greater overall gains from 2019 to 2022 in terms of dollar amount. And when we look at the gender wage gap using QWI average monthly wages for all industries, women made 65% of what men made in 2019, and that did improve slightly to 68% in 2022. So while there is progress there is definitely still more work to do. The next blog article I'm going to go over is looking at automation and how exposure to automation may differ as a function of age. So for this research, we used LMI Institute's Automation Index score to identify industries that are at high risk of automation exposure versus industries that are at low risk. And when doing this, we find that industries that are routine and manual and tend to require less skill and education have high automation exposure. So when we look at this as a function of age in our workforce, you see that young workers are disproportionately in industries with high automation exposure. So looking at the graph, you see that workers in the 14 to 24 age group, while they have 12.9% share of total employment, they have 22.6% share of employment in industries that have a high automation exposure. And this is primarily driven by the fact that young workers in North Carolina have a 41% share of employment in food services and drinking. So in addition to blog articles that we write and publish, we also have Tableau dashboards, which I'm sure most of you are familiar with. This is a recent dashboard that we just published, I believe it was last week, looking at racial equity in North Carolina. The charts that I've outlined in the red boxes are all from QWI. So we looked at employment growth, industry employment, wage growth, as well as average monthly wages in each racial and ethnic group. So starting with employment growth, you can see that the Hispanic or Latino group and the Asian American Pacific Islander groups had the largest employment growth from 2010 to 2021. When you look at the industry employment in North Carolina, You see that the white workers have the highest share of employment when looking at all industries. And for wage growth, all groups had wage growth from 2010 to 2021, with the AAPI group showing the highest wage growth during that time. And then finally, we looked at average monthly wages. And as you can see, Hispanic, American Indian, and Black populations had significantly lower monthly wages compared to the white and Asian groups. So a great feature of dashboards is the ability for people to go in and interact with it. So you can pull out the data that you are particularly interested in. So you can do this for the industry employment, which we get from QWI, and you can choose what industry you want to look at on our dashboard to identify the industry employment per racial and ethnic group. And as well, you can look at the average monthly wages by county on this dashboard. So you can go ahead and choose your local county if you want to see what the racial disparity looks like for the average monthly wages. And so those are a few examples that we have of how we use QWI data to look at disparities and opportunity gaps. And now I'm going to pass it on over to Jeff to talk a little bit more about loads data. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Maggie. So now I'm going to show you how we use the loads data. And for those who are not familiar, loads is really the data set behind the public-facing on the map tool. So all the data behind it on commuting between counties and regions and different geographies is accessible. And so we've utilized this data to help us to re-examine our economic geography in the state. So about once every 20 years or so, an administration will come in North Carolina and look at making some significant changes, particularly around economic development and economic development strategy. Back in 2012, 2013, we had a new administration who wanted to reassess the state's economic development regions and how we do business, helping to align both workforce and some of our support departments in transportation and environmental quality, as well as our community college system and education system, so that there would be sort of a cleaner, easier way for businesses to work with the state. So we took on the task of trying to examine how the state is broken up for various programs and policy decision-making. In North Carolina, we have 100 counties, which is a nice round number for doing a lot of things. It's a little difficult when you're trying to run programs statewide out of 100 different political geographies. We had, at the time, 23 workforce development boards that served the state's workforce system. We have a very robust and impactful community college system, which is designed to be within just a few hours drive of everybody in the state. We have 58 community colleges in North Carolina. We have 17 regional councils of government, which is an intergovernmental body that works on regional issues from transportation to workforce. And then, of course, as far as geographies go, OMB assigns metropolitan and micropolitan statistical areas for the state. Now, some of these geographies, the state can change even if they are somewhat difficult, particularly workforce development boards and councils of government. They can be changed. Community college technically could be changed in their service areas, but would be much more difficult to maneuver in setting up new campuses or aligning new service areas. And then, of course, the metropolitan and micropolitan statistical areas is outside of the state's purview. The metro MSAs serve to represent economic geographies using commuting in a very hub and spoke sort of fashion, where it's really based on a central business district or area and commuting in. And a lot of North Carolina is not in a metro or micropolitan area. So we found that geography limiting when we're trying to set up something for the state. So LEAD, our division, went through the process of identifying a methodology that would promote interconnectedness or regionalism, looking at not only one county's relationship to the other, but then some reciprocal relationship that would help promote regionalism. We were interested in the efficiency and efficacy of regional programs and strategies. We didn't want to try to have 100 different geographies that we needed to manage. So we needed something that would be a little more efficient in delivering economic development and workforce development programs. It was important to us to use a county level geography as a consistent measure that most of the state can recognize and relate to, as opposed to those that may change, such as city boundaries or zip codes or census tracts. We wanted to also consider out-of-state connections, and this was important because we do have a few counties that are either the central business areas on the North Carolina side or on a neighboring state side. So we wanted to assess how important those connections with those counties are. They do supply labor across state bounds, and we wanted to understand how important those connections were. And we wanted to use some data that was both current and consistent, and something that we could rely on and trust, and we could replicate over time to see how geographies change. So after doing a fairly thorough review, we came across the USDA's Economic Research Services commuting zones and labor market areas, which kind of met all of our criteria, except for the fact that they no longer update the product, so we couldn't rely on them to provide the information. But they did provide the means for us to replicate it. Now, their methodology used census data, looking at from the ACS and Journey to Work data. And we thought, based on how we were using it and our intentions, that that the loads data presented a good opportunity and was easier to collect. And since it used administrative data as opposed to survey-based data from the ACS, may be more reliable. So we used their methodology to conduct a hierarchical cluster analysis. What does that mean? It means essentially that we are taking all of the state's geographies, all 100 counties, plus every county and city in our 5-state region that would include Virginia, Tennessee, South Carolina, and Georgia. and looked at those who commute from county A to county B, and also those that commute backwards in the other direction from county B to county A. Those two factors get added together, and then you divide by the resident labor force of the smaller county. This is conducted once for all 500 or something counties in the region, and then once those connections are identified, the two counties that represent the strongest pair are linked together, and they become a geography. And now, instead of having in North Carolina 100 geographic regions, we have 99, and we then replicate that until we get to about 25 clusters, which was what we were looking at in this particular research. I know USDA, when they were doing their analysis, they were looking at it by a population threshold, I believe, of around 100,000 people to define their labor market areas. North Carolina's got some pretty small parts of the state, so that wasn't necessarily optimal for us. If you're interested in learning more, there's some links at the bottom, and these slides will be shared so you can have access. So I'm going to show real quick how this clustering worked. As I mentioned before, we first assign a new geography to the two highest paired counties in the state, which in this instance was Wake County and Durham County, which represent the triangle, Raleigh and Wake County and Durham and Durham County. And they become one geography. And so over time, we run this over and over again, and new counties get matched together. Additional counties get clustered in with pairs, and until we get to something that is like so. So this was what we ran in 2013. You can see at the time, if you're not familiar with North Carolina geography, the two areas that do not have labels on them, one in North Georgia and one in East Tennessee, were included in the labor market regions that were defined. We ran this again over the next few years just to see how things would change. Here, if you're not familiar, again, with North Carolina's geography, gives you some idea of our major metropolitan areas. The triangle having a high percentage of people who live and work in the region. So that's what the number here represents. The 81% of the residents of this geography work in this geography. And then we have Greensboro, Winston-Salem, and Charlotte. The other two larger or darker colored areas on the map include Asheville in the far west and Wilmington in the southeast. So as I mentioned, we ran this every year, including the recent 2020 update of the loads data. And what we found were, one, labor markets changed, but not significantly. Some regions, such as the Winston-Salem Greensboro region, went back and forth between being connected and not being connected, and some of the outlying counties moved between metro areas. So those that were kind of caught in between Charlotte and what we call the triad, the Greensboro, Winston-Salem region, sometimes fluctuated back and forth. We also identified a few counties that were not related to any county, particularly Lee County in the middle of the state. And that showed us that there may be real economic development opportunities where that county is really the reason why it's not connected and loosely connected, has loose commuting within it, is that it is close to 4 of our major metro areas. So while it's not really close to any one, it's within a convenient range that it can serve a much larger area. So it might be perfect for certain economic development projects that want to have access to both Charlotte and the Triad and the Triangle. We use this data to conduct regional SWOT analyses. As I mentioned, at the time, the state was interested in pulling together different departments to better serve businesses and residents. So those people were not necessarily familiar with these labor market definitions, having come from different workforce board or economic development zones. So we conducted a SWOT analysis to help them and their customers better understand the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats of their region. This geography became the basis for our employment projections that we do. We are originally doing those based off of workforce development boards, which were designed originally from some historic connections and a political process. So instead, we looked at more of a labor market, which we found is more effective for delivering this information to our customers. And then ultimately, we ended up using this to help inform a realignment of our workforce boards. I showed that we had 23 workforce boards back several years ago. It's now been reduced to 20, and there's still some more consolidation that's ongoing. So now I'll turn it over to my colleague, Jamie Vaughn, who will look at how we utilize job-to-job flow data and on the map for workforce and economic development projects. Jamie?
Hi, everybody. Thanks for the introduction, Jeff, and I appreciate the opportunity to be here. As I was introduced, my name is Jamie Vaughn. And if you heard in my bio, prior to coming to work as an analyst here at LEAD, I was for 15 years or so a practicing economic development and workforce development professional. So I've worked on several significant economic development projects, worked with consultants as well as businesses, and have a pretty good sense of the data and the information that they're really looking for to help them drive decisions. North Carolina has been really successful over the last few years, bringing in several significant economic development projects in electric vehicles, battery, chip manufacturing, aerospace, many significant projects, billions of dollars, thousands and thousands of jobs. And a lot of the data that we asked about, and a lot of the data was asked for in terms of helping understand workforce and where are these companies going to be able to hire their workers. One of the examples is we'll talk about the Toyota battery plant. So Toyota battery plant, again, they're going to make batteries. It's a project where they're going to make electric batteries for electric vehicles. So it's going to build in Liberty, North Carolina, which is in Randolph County. You can see on the map here, I have the Toyota logo approximate where the facility is currently being built. And it's expected to have more than 2,000 jobs. Again, 2,000 jobs, that's a large number. Now, Randolph County is a relatively rural place in North Carolina, but it is adjacent to, for those of you that are familiar, and Jeff pointed out a few of the larger areas in North Carolina. Again, it's in the Piedmont, in the Triad region, close to Winston-Salem, Greensboro, High Point, Raleigh, Durham, Chapel Hill, Burlington, not too far away from Charlotte. Again, some of the significant areas moving forward. So the question is when you have all of these opportunities, where do we really go to look at our workers? So we wanted to bring in the on the map and looking at specifically at the loads data to help them understand big picture. Hey, where are we going? Are we going to go to Raleigh, Durham? Are we going to go to Greensboro, Winston-Salem? Kind of help understand. Now, taking a step back. So again, working with an economic developer in their region, whether it's a county, a regional partnership, something along those lines, they should have a good sense of the commuting patterns in their area. When they're doing existing industry visits, when they're talking to the constituents that live in the area, talking to elected officials, they're going to kind of get a good sense of, hey, are people generally leaving the area to work? Are people staying in the area? Are people coming to this area to work? But using and accessing on the map gives them a good sense of understanding what that data actually means. So using Randolph County, you can see that just a little bit over 19,000 folks every day come into work in Randolph County. About 18,000 stay in Randolph County, live and work in Randolph County, but there's 31, almost 32,000 folks that leave Randolph County to work. So kind of, as an economic developer, practitioner, you're going to get asked questions. Okay, well, why are people leaving? So you can access this data through loads. So you can have worker age breakdowns, worker earning breakdowns, industry class breakdowns. Again, this data is not super specific, but often you can gain some insights in terms of understanding. A couple things that I want to point out here. Number one, so we're looking at the worker earnings. So more than $3,333 per month. Now that's $40,000 a year. So again, not a significant wage, but you can see by looking at the difference between the outflow, the interior flow. So again, those people that live and work in the same county, and the inflow, you can see that the majority of folks kind of going out are gaining or earning more than $40,000 a year. So as opposed to the folks that stay in the county, only about 27% are earning that or more. And then people that are coming in, again, 32% are earning that or more. So one of the reasons that it seems pretty obvious from this is that folks are leaving for better wages, that they're finding, they're needing to leave to find better wages. So that's an interesting and important insight for somebody to understand. And again, as you're working with a company, kind of trying to understand, you can say, okay, so especially if they're coming in paying higher wages, yeah, so we have a significant outflow out of our county, but quite honestly, wage is one of the things we can identify. And if you're paying wages greater than that, there might be a likelihood that you could convince these folks to stay home for their opportunities. Another thing, looking down at the worker industry class, so again, over those goods producing, you can see that only 25% of the folks that are leaving are working in that goods producing manufacturing kind of area, where 50% of the folks that stay are working in that. And then the largest percentage of the inflow, people are coming in to work in manufacturing. So talking with, again, a project like this, a heavy manufacturing project, it's important to kind of understand that's another sales point that kind of moving forward. So now that you've gotten the company located, it's now where the rubber really hits the road, and the intersection of economic and workforce development is okay, so where are we going to get the workers? So understanding, you need to understand, number one, where do the workers who live in the, where do the workers who work in the county live? And so you can see over here on the right, and again, this is affecting that inflow as well as that interflow, those folks that stay in here, kind of looking at that intersection. You can see that in Randolph County, about half of the workers, 18,000 of all the workers in the area live and work in Randolph County. The other counties that are significant, so Guilford County, which is just to the north in Greensboro, Davidson County, which is just to the west, Forsyth County, which is Winston-Salem, so again, northwest from there, again, having to just cross over either through Davidson County or Guilford County. And then finally, Chatham County, which is just to the east. Those are the areas where you're going to get your most bang for your buck in terms of targeting and marketing, with 13% of the folks coming out of Guilford County. So understanding whether those are in different workforce board areas, understanding different nonprofits and training areas, whether it's community colleges, that's really important to understand who you need to work for to help gain and recruit that workforce that you're going to need, because these are established patterns that people are conditioned and typically come from those areas to come work in your area. Now, the other side is understanding the folks that leave, understanding where do my county's residents work. So again, so we're staying with the inflow, the people that live and work, and we're also talking about that outflow, that 32,000. So understanding, number one, where do they go and work? So Randolph County, 32% of the folks that live and work or leave Randolph County for work, about a little bit over 1 out of every 3 leave. So again, so there's an opportunity there to hold folks, as we talked about, and then they're going to Guilford County, to Davidson County, to Forsyth County. So kind of the same workflow. So that's important to understand. So maybe if the folks that were all leaving went to Raleigh over there in Wake County, the far eastern purple block there, it might be a different marketing idea. But again, you're seeing a lot of interflow in different areas. So that's important to understand and help figure out, kind of those strategies to help companies recruit, as well as which workforce boards to kind of focus and drive in on. So another thing is we're talking and we understood the flows, the commuting flows, and kind of those patterns that you can take advantage of to maximize where you're doing your collaborations, efforts, and things. But also, again, as happens, where could we recruit people who do not currently live in North Carolina to come work in North Carolina? So using job-to-job flows, specifically the J2J Explorer tool to kind of understand that. We can understand the top 10 states workers leave to work in manufacturing in North Carolina. So, and again, thinking with Toyota manufacturing, let's kind of stay in the manufacturing industry, but we can go across different industries. We could have gone information, we could have gone professional, scientific, and technical services, lots of different things we could focus on. And you can see that South Carolina is the largest state where folks come to work. And again, this is both could be potentially commuting, but also moving their residences as well, followed by Virginia, Florida, New York, Texas. Now, again, that's great information to have, but maybe we want to focus just a little bit more down that. So we could focus down at the MSA level to kind of understand where are the MSAs outside of North Carolina that workers leave to work in manufacturing in North Carolina. And you can see that the two biggest areas were non-MSAs in South Carolina and Virginia, followed by Myrtle Beach, Conway, North Myrtle Beach in South Carolina, New York, New Jersey, Newark, Jersey City, Greenville, South Carolina. So again, so these are great, this is great data to have to help focus if you're looking to do maybe a campaign, come work in North Carolina. Maybe Toyota wants to, recruit outside. Hey, where should I spend some money doing that? This is great data that you can help share with companies and in recruitment of where there has been success and people, again, have patterns of moving in North Carolina in manufacturing. So again, two examples of kind of how you can work with economic developers, kind of working within that and understanding. So how do we share this information? So of course, we get questions, whether it's specifically wrapped around an economic development project. We get questions along those lines, and we can do special research and provide them with data. But we also, for those economic developers to help understand big picture, what's going on. We have, using a Tableau dashboards, we have area profiles, where you can do it for multiple geographies, whether that's statewide, whether that's prosperity zone, which is an economic development service region, workforce development board regions, county level, where we, in addition to other labor market information about that geography, we also provide the commuting data so that folks can understand that. And, and they have access to it anytime they want to gain that. We also, accessing the loads data and put it into commuting profiles. For here, just simple PDF. So again, I've already shown you this data, but and this is only available currently at the county level. So you can see commuting reports for primary jobs in PDF. So instead of somebody going and using on the map, they can just access and pull a quick report to access their data. So at that point, I think we're ready to take questions.
All right, fantastic. Thank you, Jamie. Before we get to the questions, the presentation will be accessible on the Census Academy website at census.gov/academy under the webinar tab, and you can see that in a couple weeks. The link has been added to the chat as well. Again, please type all of your questions in the Q&A and keep them relevant to the presentation. The chat has been disabled to our attendees.
Thank you. And now with the questions. How does the QWI differ from the QCE data from BLS?
So the QCW data is the base for the QWI. So someone from LED program is welcome to correct me if I misspeak, but the states enter a sharing agreement with Census to share that data, and then the Census Bureau matches that with data collected from their statistical programs, such as the decennial census and ACS, to be able to provide more specific and detailed information about the workers.
How do we
Does anyone
identify?
from LED want to add anything more to that from LEHD?
You're good. Thank you. How do we identify area economic development opportunities using this data?
Area economic development opportunities? Well, I mentioned when we did the when we used the loads data to do our geographical analysis, we identified counties that we had data to substantiate why a region was a region. So it was able to identify opportunities where a company can draw its workforce or connect to other businesses. It also identified parts of the state that were not closely connected to a specific region, and so might be an opportunity for investment or better connectivity to a major metro region. We've also utilized QWI data to identify opportunities, whether that's looking at specific industries and the composition of those industries with their workforce, or being able to utilize some of the job-to-job flows and be able to inform our economic development partners of where they might anticipate drawing workers. I hope that answers the question.
Thank you. There's also a basic question, which we can also answer in the chat, but I also want to put it to you as a presenter, should you want to contribute to the question, the answer. Explain on the map and where it can be found. Sorry if this is covered before, before the time I joined the webinar.
Sure. So on the map is a census LED tool. It's I think we'll look at putting the URL on that in the chat. If you want, I can show you real quick what the page looks like for those who are unfamiliar with it, and share my screen again. So this is on the map. If you go to on the map, all one word, .ces.census.gov, you'll see that it is a geographic based tool. There's a with a search bar on the left-hand side. From there, you can put a city, a county, a workforce development board in there, and from that you can look at the connections between counties. So I don't think we have time in this webinar to give a full analysis, but it's fairly intuitive, but also requires a little bit of practice to know where things are located. But we found it to be a great tool that helps really quantify the relationship between regions.
Now, are there any other questions that are coming in? Take a minute or so. Typing, should they be typing a question?
So I noticed there was one question in the chat about planning to use AI in this project, and if AI fits. That is certainly something that we are exploring here in North Carolina. We've been using some AI products to look at how it can enhance our analysis. We have not yet incorporated that into our identification of geographic regions. That may be an interesting application that we should look into, but we have not done that at this time. And then I guess one last question was wondering if Toyota's poaching workers from other manufacturers. Um, I don't know if the data can tell us if they're poaching. A lot of movement between manufacturers is regular churn, which is expected. We've noticed that anecdotally, the data has not caught up because this project was not announced until 2022. So the on the map data and the Lowe's data only goes back to 2020. We know through media reports that Toyota is planning to bring a lot of workers to them and have had folks from other states volunteer to move to North Carolina to be part of that project. So it'll be interesting to look back at this data in a couple of years and see where some of those workers actually came from and whether they came from other manufacturers in the state, different geographies of the state, and different geographies across the nation.
Concludes our Q&A session. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you everyone for joining us this afternoon, and I would like to especially thank Jamie, Jeff, and Maggie for their excellent presentation. Would any of you like to make any closing remarks at this time?
No, thank you. Thank you, Census Bureau, the LEHD program for allowing us to present. If anyone has any additional questions or things that North Carolina can help with, or Maggie, Jamie, or myself, please feel free to reach out.
All right. Please join us as our LED webinar series continues on October 18th at 1:30 p.m. Eastern Time, when the San Diego Association of Governments, or SANDAG, data science team presents Studying Workers' Travel Patterns to Employment Centers Using Census Data. Upon exiting this webinar, you will be asked to fill out an evaluation. We would appreciate that you take the time to answer the questions so we may better serve you with future webinars. Until then, on behalf of the U.S. Census Bureau, enjoy the rest of your afternoon and thank you for spending your day with us.